was asked to talk about the Magen David, the Star of David, which literally is translated as the Shield of David, Magen David. And I think to a certain extent, when people think of Judaism, they think of the Star of David. And the funny thing actually is that the Star of David hasn't been associated with Judaism as a symbol of Judaism only since the emancipation, only since the beginning of the 19th century. So the question is, where did it come from before? And why did it become what it became? If we go back into antiquity, there's a book called the Timaeus by Plato, where he claims that the universe was created through geometric figures. And he brings three geometric figures, which is the square and the circle and the triangle. So this idea of using geometry as an idea goes back to antiquity. Pythagoras used both mathematics and geometry as mystical meanings. And this is all the way back in the 6th century before the Common Era. So again, it's not unusual to have symbols which have many meanings, symbols, geometric symbols, which are imbued with meaning. Why it's called the Star of David specifically. In modern Hebrew, David, or David, is spelled like this. This is the D, the Dalet, the Vav, and the D. As you know, the Hebrew alphabet is, we could talk about another time, predates all the other alphabets. And the Greek and the Latin alphabets were actually based on the Hebrew alphabet. So the Hebrew alphabet goes Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Daled, A, B, C, D, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta. So you can see how, just as an example. So in modern Hebrew, we write David this way. In ancient Hebrew, David was actually two triangles. The triangle was the D sound and the Vav in the middle. If you put these two triangles, one on top of the other, it creates a hexagon. So one of the speculations in a book called Sefer Matamim is that it's associated with David because from the name of David in Old Script, you could actually create a hexagon. As far as we know, the association between the Star of David, or the hexagon, with Judaism seems to be a symbol, a mystical symbol, and not necessarily a symbol of Judaism, but a symbol within Judaism. Having said that, I have to say that the hexagon is associated both with Judaism and the Islam. The Islam today uses the five-pointed star much more commonly, but if you go, for instance, to the Islamic Museum in Jerusalem, you can see ceramics which have the hexagon on them, and not just the five-pointed star. The earliest symbol we have of the Shield of David in a synagogue is somewhere between the 3rd and 4th century in a synagogue in the Galilee in Israel, and it's called Cherbet Shura, and there we find the hexagon, the Star of David, as a symbol used in the synagogue, but not necessarily of Judaism. But it's a Jewish symbol. We also find it on coins from the Bar Kokhba revolt in 145 of the Common Era. So this is going back almost 2,000 years of the use of such a symbol within Judaism. We also have manuscripts from Cairo in the 11th century, which have on them the Star of David, and in the Leningrad Bible of the year 1008 also has the Star of David on it. As a mystical symbol, the Star of David is sometimes called the Seal of Solomon. But of course, it's the same family, David and Solomon. And in a mystical book, which is called Raziel the Angel. Raziel means God's secrets. Raziel the Angel, which is a Kabbalistic book. It's actually a manual of how to write amulets for protection and things like that. So it was first printed in 1701, but the book itself goes back at least to the 13th century. I say at least because we have a translation of the book from the 13th century. It definitely predates the 13th century. And it also uses the Magen David as a mystical symbol as part of his amulets. So the question is, how does the Magen David, the Star of David, move from being a mystical symbol used within Judaism, and in antiquity also at certain points within the Islam, and all of it suddenly becomes the symbol of Judaism? This seems to happen in Europe after the emancipation. As Jews are given equal rights, they feel the necessity to make certain things similar about Judaism to the other monotheistic religions. We associate Christianity, of course, with the cross. The Islam uses the crescent to represent it. The Jews had no symbol which represented Judaism. So the Magen David, which was used in synagogues, like we can see here, among other symbols, like for instance the lion, which is the symbol of Judah. And Judah was the remnant that was left over from the kingdom of Israel after the exile of the northern tribes of Israel. But it became a symbol which was felt that this symbol could be a dominant symbol within Judaism, and somehow within the 19th century, it became the symbol of Judaism. And it became more prominent in the synagogues. And when Jews wanted to represent Judaism, they used the Magen David, the Star of David. The second part of the evolution of the Star of David as a representative of Judaism is when it's made its way on representing the Zionist movement and became part of the flag of the future state of Israel. There were two modern Zionist movements. One of them was the Russian and Romanian Zionist movement, which was called the Lovers of Zion, Chibat Zion. They had conferences here in Romania in Focșani, and then later in Katowice in Poland. And they tried to be practical. And the first practical thing they did was they set up settlements in 1882 in Rishon LeZion, in Zichron Yaakov, in Petach Tikva, various settlements which predated the state. And in the city of Rishon LeZion, they decided they needed a flag. And somebody took the Jewish prayer shawl, which comes with stripes, both black and blue. I have a blue one, other people have a black one. And they stuck the Star of David on it, the hexagon, the Magen David, and they hoisted it as a flag. And that was the first flag associated with what would later be the state of Israel. At least from the 12th century, when the Kabbalah is its birth within Europe, originally in Provence and after in Girona, in Castilla in Spain, and eventually in Sfat in the land of Israel. So we find the use of triangles. I don't want to explain too much, but already as early as the 12th century, and definitely from the 13th, and a lot in the 16th, the use of the triangles is very common. Without explaining too much, I want to explain the two major triangles which are used in Kabbalistic literature. One is called the triangle of the head, and what is called the triangle of the heart. In Kabbalistic literature, there are three parts to the heart and three parts to the brain. The part which is most obvious, intelligence in the brain, and wisdom. So human beings have wisdom, which is intuitive, and intelligence, which is logical. So what's this at the top? Keter, the crown. It's because everything comes from God. So we have an intuition, artistic intuition, we have intelligence, and we have the ability to relate to God, which is our soul. That's the top of the triangle. That's why it points up. Right? All animals, their heads are pointing down. Only the human being stands erect and his head is pointing up. The second part is the part that points down, meaning it's part of the natural world, like the animal kingdom. And there are three main emotions of the heart, which are associated with this triangle pointing down. It's called love, which is called the right arm, fear, which is called the left arm, and compassion, which is actually associated with the heart. Love, fear, and compassion. The idea of the merging of the two together means that a balanced human being is when the mind and the heart are working together. Especially since the emotions can bring us to places which are sometimes illogical. So the balance is when the mind and the heart works together, and that's the idea of the two triangles merging one into another.